Hello and welcome. Welcome to another edition of Atlas Information Live. I'm your host, Atlas Alex, and I have a frog in my throat again. Probably because mere moments before today's live stream, my microphone stand. I have this, this retractable arm that's the microphone is attached to. The base of it just decided to break. It's it turns out it was made of cheap plastic, and by the looks of things, it had been hanging on by a few shreds of glue for who knows how long, but it finally gave out mere moments before we started today. So that's why I'm a little bit late. I was attempting a quick fix with duct tape, of course, but unfortunately that didn't do the trick. So the microphone is just sort of precariously sandwiched between the armrest of my chair and the side table that holds my mouse. So hopefully it will remain relatively prone. I'll keep an eye on it. And if there's any problems with the audio, do let me know, as you always do. So with that out of the way, unfortunately, there were a few visual aids that I had hoped to prepare, but this last minute technical snafu sort of kiboshed my ability to do so. So you'll have to use your imagination, and because I'm not going to bother looking it up, and I don't know how much value it brings to be able to see it. I mean, there's some value to it, but if you use your imagination, it's just as well. Today, we are going to be talking about devotion and serving. And it's a topic which, unfortunately, it somewhat gets forgotten in spiritual circles for whatever reason. Whatever reason that people feel that they are pursuing spirituality for their own ends, I guess. They want to become enlightened. They want to be one with source. There's all sorts of these motivations why people pursue the path. But very rarely do these self-styled spiritual people talk about service and devotion, being devoted. Probably because of the sacrificial element to it. And there are many things that individuals, including ourselves, don't want to give up, don't want to sacrifice. Our time, our energy, our hobbies, our interests. Even ourselves, even that self that we identify with, that we are so convinced we cannot be without. How can I be? How can I exist without myself? However, in any genuine pursuit of what people euphemistically refer to as spirituality, devotion is not some what's the right word here? It's not some auxiliary aspect. It is not negotiable, right? It is not optional in the strictest sense. Surely we have the choice. It is our discretion whether to suffer and sacrifice on behalf of others when we are presented with the opportunity to do so. We have the choice. None of us is forced into devotion, and indeed, any such coerced or forced devotion is disingenuous. Devotion must come from within. It must come from the heart, from the depths of our being, which we have the choice, the free will to align ourselves with and surrender ourselves to. But clearly, this is no easy task, especially in this day and age when narcissism and self-aggrandizement, self-absorption, self-righteousness, and so many other insular, prideful modus operandi seems to have taken over, certainly in the West, but elsewhere around the world. Materialism, mechanicity, the vehement tribalism that we see on display since the assassination of Charlie Kirk. Whether you believe that was genuine or orchestrated is irrelevant. The fallout, the results, the effects are what matter. And each side believes that they are devoted. Each side believes that they are on the side of right, that history will judge them as being on the side of righteousness, on the right side of history, so-called. Even those on the left, ironically, believe themselves to be in the right, which, pardon the pun. So clearly there is some sort of disconnect. And speaking of Charlie Kirk, last week we were speaking of martyrdom. And true martyrdom versus manufactured martyrdom. And true martyrdom was and is, in many ways, the ultimate sacrifice, the ultimate act of service to others. It is the ultimate act of devotion, the giving of your life for the sake of others, the dying for something that is greater than yourself. But then there is this false martyrdom. There is the martyrdom that is actually born of pride, born of mystic pride. There are many, many individuals on both sides of the political divide, which count themselves as kind of martyrs because they believe themselves to be devoted to what is right and proper and good, and they believe themselves to be devoted to their country, for example, or devoted to God, devoted to Jesus. Or on the other side, they're devoted to justice, and they're devoted to equity and inclusion and diversity and these other mantras of the secular radical left, which is not even the radical left anymore, it's the mainstream left. And every time something happens which disturbs their perceived worldview, their idealized worldview, how they believe things should be, and in truth, how they've been conditioned to believe that, on both sides, they have a kind of breakdown. Certainly, in recent years, this has been more visible to those on the left as opposed to those on the right. However, the assassination of Charlie Kirk seemed to be a line that was crossed. And now, this past week, we had a propagandist, a very prominent propagandist for the left, and a late night talk show host, Jimmy Kimmel. He was dismissed by ABC, or at least his show was taken off the air indefinitely. Or did they say temporarily? Indefinitely for the foreseeable future, or who knows what. There's all kinds of legal jargon involved, and I don't like getting into the weeds. The point is, he was taken off the air, and now his supporters and the left in general, they're up in arms. They're having a complete mental breakdown, and they're yelling and screaming and beating their chest about free speech. These are the people who were canceling anyone who questioned the vaccines, the efficacy or the safety of the vaccines, or even the true nature of the COVID pandemic 5 years ago. The same people who are now crying for free speech were the ones who are canceling people, muzzling people, silencing people, getting people fired for making tweets questioning the safety and efficacy of the vaccine, and countless other things since then. These are the ones who have been policing speech for over 5 years and destroying reputations and careers and lives via their cancel culture because of somebody said something that they didn't like, that didn't jive with that did not compute with their mechanistic, secular, atheist, radical, leftist ideology. And in fact, they were calling for death. They were calling for people to be killed. Back in COVID, people who speak out against the vaccine, they deserve to die, was some of the quotes that even Jimmy Kimmel was saying at the time. No one batted an eyelash. No one said anything at the time. And when someone like Gina Carano, who was on a Disney Plus show, and Disney owns ABC, she tweeted something and was fired for it. And everyone on the left, no one jumped to her side. No one jumped to her support, defending her right to speech, her right to freedom of speech, because she was on the right of that spectrum. She was not one of them. She was a political opponent. But now that Jimmy Kimmel, who is not only one of them, he's a prominent voice for the left and one of, I guess, one of their heroes. And when his show is taken off the air for what he said, and basically he was saying that that the individual who killed Charlie Kirk was that people on the right were doing everything in their power to make it seem like he wasn't one of them, that he wasn't a MAGA supporter, which is, at least according to mainstream sources, that's a bold-faced lie. It was an out and out falsehood. It wasn't a joke. It wasn't even made for laughs. It was just a statement of fact that he believed and that he made publicly on his show. And his show was taken off the air because of it. And many believe that the death of Charlie Kirk might be an opportunity to turn down the gas, to turn down the heat, dial everything back, return to the table, start talking again with each other. But the opposite has happened, and everything's being dialed up to 11, and the vitriol and the anger and the spite on both sides of the aisle just keeps getting ratcheted up. And both sides, everyone, including the moderates in the middle, would argue that they are devoted to what's right and what's true and what's best. But what, if anything, are they sacrificing? Who are they serving? Because it's a sort of nebulous concept. Serving something greater than yourself, or serving what's right, or serving what, sacrificing yourself for what you believe. Well, what is that? And how do you know that what you believe in is worthy of your sacrifice? What is the litmus test? How do you know? I've often spoken about the difference between belief and knowledge. The difference between thinking and knowing. But that is a nuance which the vast majority of people do not have. They do not possess that nuance. Or if they do, they don't know it. They don't possess it consciously. Everybody intrinsically, intuitively knows, for instance, when they are in love. But even then, people can think they are in love. People can fall in love with the idea of being with someone. I know, I've experienced it. I speak from experience there. You meet someone and you formulate an idea about them and a fantasy future with them. And you become so identified and attached to that fantasy, to that idea, that utopian concept of a beautiful, wonderful life together, that you become enamored not with the person who's there, but your mental and emotional construct of them. Many women experience this on the basis of meeting a man who is in some way broken or damaged. And they think to themselves, oh, I will fix him. He's a fixer-upper. But I will fix him and I will mold him and I will shape him into the man that he can be, which, in all fairness, is an aspect of the feminine force. It is an aspect of the feminine impulse to nurture and to help grow and to help not just sustain, but to lift up and to provide the medium in which an individual can thrive. But unfortunately, the inferior sentimental mind and the inferior sentimental heart will construct its own image of what that actualized individual will look like and be like. And usually that construct is some form of projection of their own desires. You see, the idea that we have of someone and the person that they will become, the person that I will help make them, that idea is not born of them, it is born of us. It comes from our own mind and we project that onto them. And so this is how it's possible to become in love with not the person who's there and not the person that they are meant to become, but the idea, an idealized image. And we become identified and devoted to that image. And it is so tantalizing. It is so hypnotic. We can become obsessed with it. We can, and all of this obsession, when it's wrapped up in the emotion of sexuality and sexual attraction, that certainly has all of the trappings of being in love. But in truth, we are in love with ourselves. And we are devoted only to ourselves. We are serving and sacrificing for what we want, for what we hope to achieve, for a return on investment. And our obsession with that return gives this foundation and a conduit for an infatuation. And as we all know, because we've all been there, we've all experienced infatuation and have mistaken it for love. And along with that infatuation comes that infatuation that is ultimately self-serving, because that's what infatuation is. It builds into it the self-righteousness of perceived sacrifice and devotion and suffering on their behalf. And we feel ourselves glowing with pride when we have an opportunity through our infatuation to appear devotional and appear sacrificial and appear to have given of ourselves. But again, what are we giving ourselves to? We're giving ourselves to our own concept, our own idea, our own fantasy of a life of pleasure and happiness and peace and joy and tranquility and whatever else we build into the fantasy that we have projected on to that other individual. Let me very quickly get to some comments. Eduardo says, hello, nice to have you here back. Eduardo says, when morality fails, justice reigns. And Tiffany says, not my quote. A microscope shows our significance while a telescope shows us our insignificance. That's interesting. We might have to come back to that one later. Leah de Tonacour says, sorry I'm late. I've been taking care of my grandmother. Haven't had a lot of time to myself. No, fair enough. It's all good. It's all good. Speaking of devotion, right? And sacrifice and serving others, which we all do to one degree or another. When I say we all, I mean probably all of us here on this live stream. There are many people out there in the world who don't. They simply don't care. Now, many others don't have an opportunity, and many more feel like they don't have the means to do so. They live in poverty, or they're too busy. That's a common one. And then there are others who they have a different kind of laziness. They have a different kind of way of avoiding true devotion. They intuitively know that they're not living a life of devotion. And so, but they don't really want to do so. So what they do is they become very busy volunteering, giving their time and giving their energy, or doing philanthropy, giving their money, donating here and donating there, and doing all kinds of volunteer work. And they will volunteer at the church and volunteer at the community center and volunteer and volunteer and volunteer. And they become these self-styled, caring, giving, like saying yes to everybody. They're not exactly people pleasing. They're just desperate to avoid real devotion. And you might say, well, that sounds ironic or strange. Like, how can somebody who's spending all their time and energy doing volunteer work, how can they lack devotion? And the simple answer is, if their volunteer work is a distraction, if their volunteer work is a way for them to avoid true devotion, then they're not really sacrificing for others. They're not really serving others. They're serving others, yes, on one level, on some sort of superficial, very thinly veiled level, they're serving others. And it's enough of a service that they convince themselves and they rationalize that I'm doing good things for people. I volunteer all the time, and I donate money, and I donate to charity, and so on and so forth, right? And they rationalize to themselves. But they're not devoted. They haven't devoted their lives. And this busy work, this volunteer work, where they socialize and they network and they get, they get what do you call it? The feels, right? And they feel good about themselves. And again, they get to rationalize, they get to reinforce the illusion that they're a good person who's helping others and supporting others and serving others. But we began today talking about spirituality and the path. And how avoiding devotion, avoiding service is, we have the choice, but it's not optional if you want to be on the path. The path is a path of service and sacrifice and devotion. It is not a path of going on top of the mountain and meditating and achieving enlightenment and saying, and then, wiping your hands and saying, I'm done, I'm enlightened, I've achieved whatever level I was hoping to achieve. So what? For who? So we come back to this question. Okay, well then, what is devotion, or how do we do service to others and devotion properly? Is there a way, is there a practice that we can begin right now in this moment that sets us on a course of service and sacrifice, of devotion? In other words, that keeps us on what sometimes is referred to as the straight and narrow, the difficult path through the narrow gate into heaven. And there are few who take it. And all of the Christians doing all of that volunteer work would be up in arms and railing and rationalizing and protesting how wrong I am, how wonderful work that they do, and how many people that they help, and the community that service that they do, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they would rationalize all of that in the same way that the social justice warrior rationalizes their beliefs and how their actions and their way of living and their demands and their entitlements are actually what's best for all of humanity and for others. That they too are serving, that they too are sacrificing, and that they too have a community. And what's more, the communities that they serve, that they support, perhaps not directly, but indirectly through how they vote, the legislation they support, the lawmakers that they vote for and get behind. And what those individuals and those political movements represent is a force of positive change for the disadvantaged, for the downtrodden, for the victimized, for the oppressed, et cetera, et cetera. And the social justice warrior projects onto those groups their own victimhood that they have somehow appropriated, they have identified with, and they become attached to. And they've altered it. They've using their own imagination, their own fantasy, and then they've projected that fantasy suffering onto others, and then cried havoc, right? And charged at the windmill that they now perceive is a dragon. And they believe themselves sacrificing and in service and devotion and devoted. It is a very difficult thing for a mortal to truly grasp outside of family, because it's hard to argue the fact that in a great many families, a husband and wife are not only devoted to one another and devoted to their family, but to their children. And even though that devotion can likewise be corrupted and twisted into something other than devotion, and we'll get to it in a moment, we cannot be so callous and so, what's the word, judgmental, and so unfair as to say that most parents do not feel genuine devotion and genuine sense of service and sacrifice for their children, because no matter how bad things get, uh, parents, generally speaking, and not just generally speaking, but for the most part, the majority of parents will put their children first, ahead of their own lives, their own health, wellness, livelihood, sanity, and you name it. Like parents, it's incredible what parents will sacrifice for the sake of their children. Like, let's be fair, let's be real, and we see it all the time. If we're honest and truthful and give credit where credit is due, it's there, and I don't deny that. And that's real devotion, that's real sacrifice, and that's real suffering. Parents who give up holidays, vacations, they give up, you know, nice clothes and nice cars, and they give up going, you know, having memberships at the country club, and why do they give up all of these things? Well, because that money is better spent on the children. It's better spent on education. It's better spent on you know, clothes for the kids, or what have you, right? So they put their children first. They're devoted completely to their children, to the well-being of their children, to the upbringing of their children, and to the success of their children. And yes, to the safety and the comfort and security of their children. That sort of goes without saying. But even that devotion can become twisted. even that devotion can become corrupted. Even that devotion can become an obsession, an infatuation. That is ultimately self-serving. And the clear example of this is what we refer to as helicopter parenting. And parents who raise their children in hermetically sealed environments wrapped in bubble wrap. I mean, these are the extreme hyperbolic analogies and language that we use to describe what parents who are so afraid of failing in their devotion, they're so afraid of harm coming to their children. They're terrified of how that would make them feel, of the guilt that they would be inflicted with, and the suffering they would have to endure, heaven forbid, if something happened to their children. You might say, well, no, that's ridiculous. They actually care about the safety of their children. Yes, they do. But they become so identified and attached to the safety of their children that the safety of their children becomes a factor in their own existential beingness. And their fear of death, their own death, their fear of shame, their fear of being judged, their fear of what others, being judged, what others would think of them, and their fear of being alone, and their fear of failing, their fear of failure is so profound and so intense and so deep that they cannot allow that to happen. They cannot be lousy parents. So they become these hyper parents. And that's another word that's used, hyper parenting. And they end up smothering the children. They insulate the children. They prevent the children from having an actual normal, healthy childhood. Because they're so terrified of something happening to their children. They're so devoted to their children, or at least that's what they think. That's what they believe. But that devotion is being twisted and corrupted into a self-serving, self-righteous, self-defense mechanism, where it's as much about them, or even more about them, than it is about their children. Because if it was really about the children, then they could relax. But you know of yourself, your own demons, your own egos that you suffer from, right? The things that trigger your anger when things don't go your way, and or when you're late, or you know whatever it is that gets to you, that pushes your buttons, you know how stressed you become, how tense, mentally, emotionally, and even physically, when it's about you. When it's about others, we're if it's really about others, we are relaxed. If we're tensing up and we're telling ourselves it's about others, but we're tensing up and we're getting stressed and we're getting frustrated and angry, it's not about them. It's about us. It's about some I. It's about some ego that wants a certain outcome, that is getting involved, that is wrapping itself up in the so-called service and devotion to others. And when that happens, if you are observing yourself, then you know you're not really serving and sacrificing for others. There's a caveat to that rule, and the caveat is when you are facing death, like when you're facing martyrdom, then obviously your fear and your self-preservation instinct will want to get involved. And it is one of the great mysteries that is of Christianity, of the passion play, the crucifixion, that Jesus endured the crucifixion with equanimity. Yes, there's in the Bible that when he was on the cross, before he dies, he yells out, "Oh my God, why have you forsaken me?" Yes, sure, that's there. And he does fall several times, 3 times. But of course, these all have symbolic significance, number 1, but more importantly, the the kind of um, given the ruthless brutality that he endured, his response was remarkably measured and calm and peaceful, because by that point he had given himself to his fate, and he had resigned to whatever circumstances and outcomes were to befall him in that process. He well and truly was giving his life for others, but not just others, but all of humanity. Does that mean there were moments that he didn't suffer pain, or that he didn't suffer doubt, or like again on the moment on the cross, or in the garden the night before in Gethsemane when he's in the garden praying, asking his God, if this is your, if it can, let this cup pass me by, but not by my will, but thine be done. So the ego, the mortal self, is going to want to get involved, is going to want to get a word in edgewise, and is going to want to come in between us and our act of service and suffering for others, our act of devotion, our ego is going to want to get in there. Why? Because egos all identify themselves as I, me, myself. That's where their interest lies. They see any act of devotion, of service and sacrifice to others as an energy leak, as a waste of resources, and as an unjust direction of consciousness. The eyes, like, do you have a cat or a dog or a 2-year-old or or a 5-year-old for that matter? Do you have something or someone in your life that demands your attention? And even if you don't, you all have a cell phone that's constantly beeping and vibrating and sending noises. Why? To distract you and to tell you, hey, I'm here. Come and pay attention to me. Come and pay attention to me. I'm here. Have you forgotten me? Pay attention to me. Come and touch me. Come and play a game on me. Come and do your social media through me. Me. And all the apps vying for your attention and vying for your energy. Why? It's a machine. That's what machines do. Machines can't exist without energy. And something with a screen has no purpose for being unless it is being watched. This is why we have this term called selfishness. Selfishness is not just, being greedy, right? Selfishness is not just not wanting to share your stuff with others, but it is also that. But that is the most obvious and basic expression of selfishness. But the rest of the time, selfishness, we have words for this, right? It's like narcissism, self-absorption, self-righteousness, always thinking about ourselves and what we want and what we don't want and how come it didn't turn out the way we wanted it. And it's me, myself, and I. It's all ego. And it's all focused this way because that's what ego wants, because that's ego's job. Its job is governed by the existential survival instinct of the machine that wants to endure and function and operate to its fullest capacity, to its fullest power, or to the least of its capacity and least power, depending on which way your orientation is. But it wants the focus to be on it. And when the focus isn't on it, it can get very tense and very anxious and very frustrated and very angry and very envious. And we can tense up. But that's how we know that anything that we're doing for others, are we really doing it for others, or it's we ourselves are in there, and it wants to make sure that it's getting what it wants out of the exchange. But when we are fully and completely selflessly devoted with all humility and without anything twisted corruption, without any caveats, no strings attached. In other words, unconditional love, unconditional service, unconditional devotion. Then we give of ourselves, and it's bliss. There's no frustration. There's no stress. There's no anxiety. There's just the joy of serving others and the joy of giving what we have to give. And the joy of being who we truly are, which is selfless, our individuated essence of selflessness. That famous no self of the Buddhists, that place that you can arrive at within yourself in deep meditation and in contemplation and in self-observation. So if we know what false devotion is, and we know what true devotion isn't, and we know what true devotion is, well, then how do we get there? There is a man by the name of Alexander Dugin, and he's from, I believe he's from from Russia, but that might be wrong. He might be from the Ukraine, but he's definitely from that part of the world. And he has been a very outspoken voice and critic of the modern world. And if you want to look up his videos, you can see him speaking on YouTube, but also on BitChute and Rumble and other platforms. And he's sort of, I'm not exactly sure what his background is, but it might be philosophy. It might be that he was a teacher or some professor of history or something like that. But he's definitely counts himself as a kind of modern day philosopher, and not just philosopher, but like I said, a critic. And and honestly, his philosophy or his critiques invariably cross over into matters of theology and matters of not just psychology but spirituality, with relation to traditional values and mysticism, in the sense that the fact that the modern world has all but eliminated mysticism and the metaphysical from its modus operandi, that the secularization of everything is part of the cause of all of our problems and all the psychological, mental health crises, et cetera, because without the sacred, you end up with existential nihilism and atheistic nihilism and so on. It's not the content of his message that is so important, because of course there's many parallels between what he says and how he says it, with myself and with many others who are, who are becoming more and more vocal critics of the West, and they're starting to garner uh, larger and larger followings, because what they say is beginning to make sense to more and more people, especially as things keep slipping into further and further into decline. And so Alexander Dugin is one of these voices. talking about the expressed structural, psychological, sociological, and cultural, wow, and political, again, and theologic, like, I mean, all the different reasons why he sees the West is in a precipitous slide, in a downward spiral, much like Rome. But that's not my reason for bringing him up today. The reason is because there was an assassination attempt made on his life. And I'm not entirely sure of the details of how it went down. All I know is that the assassin missed the mark insofar as Alexander Dugin is still alive and well. Unfortunately, the attempted assassination on ended up taking Alexander Dugin's daughter's life. This was not um, certainly from any mortal worldly perspective, it was not planned this way. As a result, uh, Alexander Dugin did not stop his what he perceives as his life's work, his life's mission, to continue speaking out against authorities, against governments, and against the global elite and corporations and the big machine and its apparent uh, plan to achieve some sort of totalitarian control over humanity. He is still every bit as active as he was before his daughter was killed. And in many ways, he is more determined. He is more devoted to his life's work. And it's very telling that if you see a video of his where he's live streaming from wherever he's live streaming from his home or from wherever he is on the road, because he does travel a lot and he does do a lot of podcasts and interviews and this sort of work. Anytime that you see one of his videos, it is very likely that you will see a portrait of his daughter in the background. He takes an 8x10 portrait of his daughter everywhere he goes. And he sets it up in the room where he's working in front of his computer or behind him or somewhere where she can be seen. And he is absolutely devoted to the memory and the sacrifice of his daughter. She died so that he could live. She gave her life so that he could survive and do the work that he is here to do. And he knows this. He knows this deep down in the deepest cockles of his being. He knows that his daughter gave her life for his life's work. Now, This means that for him to fail, or for him to give up, or for him to abandon his life's work would be like him giving up and abandoning his own daughter. Kathy says, yes, I have seen the portrait of his daughter. Yeah. The power of this, the meaning, the significance of this in Alexander Dugin's life. The fact that it's no longer just some intellectual judging and criticizing and bitching and complaining about the declining West. It is now an act of devotion to his daughter. It is an act of honoring the memory and the sacrifice that she made to the cause of truth, to the purpose of healing, to the shoring up, the reinforcing, the supporting of him in his life's work. She was there for him, of course, in life, but there was only so much that she could do for him in life. But in death, and the way in which she died, the reason for which she died, her sacrifice is of infinite more service to him and his life's work. She is that much more supportive of him in death than she was in life. And he knows it, and he values it, he respects it, he honors it, and he is completely devoted to her. For that reason, that her sacrifice is the gift that keeps on giving. And no matter how difficult things get, no matter how afraid he becomes, how many death threats or how many, complicated steps that he must take when moving around from country to country in order to continue his work, his devotion to her keeps him going. And her devotion to him and his mission, his cause, keeps him going. Now, let's be honest with ourselves and let's be practical. Not all of us have a daughter like that, or a wife like that, or a spouse like that, or a friend, or a cousin, or a mother, or a father. Not all of us are going to have someone who gives their life for us in our life's work. We do not have the luxury of such an externalized, living, breathing symbol and embodiment to take her portrait and carry her with us everywhere that we go. So what do we do? How do we find that devotion that Alexander Dugin has for his daughter who gave her life for him and made him the man he is today? Her sacrifice really took him to the next level, certainly to the next level of devotion and to the next level of fulfillment and self-actualization of his life's work, the self-actualization of his being, the reason why he was born. So what do we do? Practically speaking, this is a promise that I made in the description of today's live stream, is I would give you a practical way to achieve the path of devotion. I've spoken before about Leonardo da Vinci and about the Mona Lisa. And if you have seen the Mona Lisa, you know that it's like roughly this big. It's small. It's just big enough that it could be put into a frame or rolled up, but kept in a frame and put in a portfolio and carried by Leonardo everywhere he went. And wherever he went, he set up the Mona Lisa where he was working, where he was drawing, where he was writing, sketching, whatever, or above his bed where he was praying and meditating. The Mona Lisa was there. He took it everywhere he went with him. In the same way that Alexander Dugin takes a portrait of his daughter. Now, Leonardo da Vinci was an old man when he became famous with his long beard and everything else. Like old man from the point of view of that era. Is it possible that he had a secret daughter? No, that's not where I'm heading with this. There's no conspiracy theory. There's nothing to suggest that this was his daughter, like it was Alexander Dugin's daughter. No. And the rest of the world still doesn't know the identity of the Mona Lisa. But I do. Just as I know that before she passed away, my mother spoke the words of my individual divine mother to me. Just as I know, just as Alexander Dugin knows, that his daughter became a living, breathing embodiment of his divine mother when she gave her life for him. Just as Leonardo da Vinci painted a portrait of his divine mother and called it the Mona Lisa, Mona Isis, my divine mother. Just as Rumi wrote countless love poems to his divine mother. Just as Beethoven wrote love letters to his immortal beloved. Just as countless artists and poets and musicians fully and completely devoted themselves to their muse, the source of their inspiration, the object of their devotion, that whom they served, whom they sacrificed and suffered for, because she was the one who furnished them with all that they needed on the path in order to succeed. In order to become the person, the artist, in this case, that they were born to be. This is a universal, timeless, ancient tradition that artists and writers and poets have, and philosophers and theologians and saints have followed. The devotion to the Divine Mother. Even in Christianity, the cult of Mary, and in other, let's call them more Gnostic sects, the cult of Mary Magdalene. The devotion to the divine feminine exists in a very powerful way, even in Catholicism. It wasn't stamped out by the patriarchy. The reverence that, for example, the reverence that you see of the Divine Mother in Roman Catholic churches in South America and Central America, it's incredible. And they will go and they will have these parades through town carrying these giant effigies of the Virgin Mary, and they're singing hymns, and they're praying the rosary and singing hymns, and people are throwing garlands of flowers around her neck, and the adoration of the Virgin Mary is an incredibly powerful aspect of Catholicism and other Christian sects as well, but in particular Catholicism. And then that gets transferred in a very meaningful way to Mary Magdalene. You have the mother of Jesus and you have the wife of Jesus, and they're both called Mary because they both embody the same principle. The divine feminine, which furnishes us with all that we need on the path. Which is a path of service and sacrifice and devotion. Are we beginning to see an alignment here? Just as Alexander Dugin's daughter gave her life for the sake of his life's work, for the sake of him becoming the man he was born to become, the divine feminine within us gives all that she is to us in order so that we may become what we were born to be, and so that we may accomplish what we were born to do. Is that not reason enough for us to take the example of Alexander Dugin, Leonardo da Vinci, and these other great figures from history, and always carry with us at all times a portrait of our Divine Mother, and to always revere and honor and respect and devote ourselves to her who is so completely devoted to us? Your body is hers. Your strength is hers. Your energy, your vitality is hers. And going down the line, all the serendipities, the synchronicities, the people who show up in your life who act as mirrors or guides or adversaries to test you, to challenge you. Every obstacle, every test, every trial, every ordeal, also every boon, every miracle, it is all her work, her orchestration. Is that not worthy of devotion? And when we serve others, when we act from a place of devotion and devotion to the divine feminine, out there is all the divine feminine, Mother Nature. The entire universe is feminine. Psyche is feminine. So when Jesus said, "Do unto others as you would have done unto you," you can reverse that. And this is what I'm arguing for today. Do unto others as your divine mother does unto you. Serve others. Devote yourself to others, following the example of how your divine mother devotes herself to you. Then your devotion will not come from your ego. Your devotion will come from your divine mother. We learn by experience. We learn by watching, not by listening, by observing ourselves and remembering our divine mother, honoring her, respecting her, devoting ourselves and our lives to her, to she who makes us all that we are and furnishes us with all that we need, not what we want, but what we need. So if you do unto others as you would have done unto you, reverse it. Do unto others as you have been done unto by your divine mother. Then you will live a life of devotion. Because then your divine mother will see you as her child, a chip off the old block, one who embodies her selfless, unconditional love. But that's not any kind of soft, sentimental love. You know that means severity and mercy in balanced measure, applied unconditionally with infinite wisdom. That's the love of the Divine Mother. That's the love of a parent who truly is devoted to their children. Severity and mercy. This is the secret why Alexander Dugin has a portrait of his daughter. It's just that he needed some kind of terrestrial worldly analog for him to orient himself in this way. He needed an embodiment, a living, breathing embodiment of the divine feminine in his life, who gave herself, sacrificed herself for him so that he could become completely and fully devoted to his own divine mother, who embodied herself in the form of his daughter. But you and I, we don't require any such analog. All we need to do is meditate and pray and visualize our divine mother, and we can visualize her. She can take whatever form she chooses in our life. She can be for you that incredible statue of the goddess Athena, or she can be for you Isis, or she can be for you Mary, or she can be for you any goddess from any tradition throughout history. Or she can be for you the Mona Lisa. And you can remember her. You can have her, you can hold her in your mind's eye, moment by moment, as you observe yourself. And as you observe the ways in which ego attempts to twist and corrupt your devotion and make it self-serving, and make it egotistical, make it about self-righteousness and mystic pride and so on, and try to turn it into fanaticism, and try to turn it into obsession, and try to turn it into infatuation. But that is the power of some kind of externalized vision of your divine mother. She's inside of you. She's a part of you. She's a part of your higher self. But remember what I said about doing for others and giving yourself to others and devoting yourself to others fully and completely and unconditionally. That brings peace. That brings tranquility. And that is the power of a muse. That is the power of praying to Jesus or to God or to Mary or to some so-called externalized deity. Because it creates this healthy distance between the false self and the true self. And it helps us get over the self-righteousness and the mystic pride and self-obsession and the narcissism, because it's the ego wants to get in there and wants to get between us and our higher self. And the ego loves to masquerade as our higher self. So by having an image, a portrait like Da Vinci painted, called the Mona Lisa, and by having that there, always there to remind us, always there to bring our attention to our muse, to the object of our devotion, it allows us to stay in and on the path of service and sacrifice for others, because that is the nature of the divine feminine. Consciousness is feminine. Consciousness receives impressions. There is no hope of awakened consciousness without devotion. Awakening consciousness without devotion, without sacrifice, one can awaken negatively. One can awaken as a black magician. One can awaken as a demon. If one awakens the consciousness, but is totally self-absorbed, then the consciousness awakens within the trap, within the prison of the ego. And now you're on the road of awakening negatively. And that's a real phenomenon. I've talked about the Hasna Musin before. It's one with a dual center of gravity. And that's exactly what happens if the lower center of gravity accumulates so much consciousness and you awaken the higher center of gravity, but the majority of the consciousness is oriented in the lower center, then awakening the being awakens the demon. And now the being is trapped, is stuck within the demon for all time, for all eternity. Because the demon will not allow you to eliminate it. And you will remain trapped inside of it. I know of what I speak, right? You guys have all seen, well, maybe not all of you, but many of you have seen me have a seizure right here on this program. Imagine an eternity, a seizure that lasts an eternity. So I'm very intimately knowledgeable about what I'm speaking of here and why I am so devoted to my Divine Mother, and I'm so devoted to all of you, and I'm so devoted to this humanity. Because I know what awaits those who think their spirituality is all about awakening. Just as a test, in the coming week in your travels, pay attention to how often you see the word awaken and awakening and awake. Keep a running tally in your head, or keep a notepad or something, and just do a little scratch on a piece of paper every time you come across somebody talking about being awake or awakening, and this, and seeing posts talking about how awake people are and how awake I am, and oh, and I awoke here and I awoke there, and right? Compare that to how many times you see the word devotion and sacrifice. And you will know how much trouble this humanity is in. And I'm not talking about, right, I'm not talking about the zombies, right? I'm not talking about the NPCs, the ones walking around without a soul, right? The ones who are lost. No, I'm talking about the ones who think that we're on the verge of a of a of a grand global wide great awakening. And all those people in the New Age and all these different traditions and religions believing that we're on the verge of they're on the verge of any day now. It's going to be the beginning of the golden age when everybody will be awake. A golden age is defined and divined by virtue of service, by virtue of sacrifice, by virtue of devotion. That is what the dominant, prominent characteristic of a golden age is. A golden age is one in which all of your needs are being met. And you have this incredible space, this world that is so highly and finely attuned to supporting you in self-actualization and self-realization of the being. An age in which it is commonplace for God to be made flesh. It is commonplace. Not to be taken for granted. But God, if it's commonplace for God to become flesh, that means that the majority are human beings, true human beings, Buddhas, saints. This is why the tradition of sainthood and Buddhahood are these beautiful traditions, because they give the normies and all of us something to aspire to, something to compare ourselves to and say, you know, I'm kind of spiritual, I'm doing my best, but let's be honest, I ain't no saint. I ain't no Buddha. And why there's a priest class, yeah, fine, but being a priest or being a monk does not guarantee that you're a Buddha or a saint. That's a different classification. And then above that, we have bodhisattva. And in the saint tradition, we have martyr. But if you really want to know what defines a golden age, right? If you want to talk about the golden age, that's what you should be talking about. That's what people should be talking about. Not everybody's awake. No, everybody's saintly. Everybody's a saint. Boy, are you going to get kicked out of new age groups fast for talking like that. A saint? Yeah, a saint. Someone who is an embodiment of God's love. And who embodies God's love? Mary, the Divine Mother, embodies God's love. And esoterically, what that means metaphysically, practically, it is she who gives birth to the Christ. What is the Christ? That is God's love in action. The fire of the fire, the lightning and the thunder that descends from on high Mount Olympus, where Zeus sits upon the throne, but hurls his thunderbolts. Hey Zeus, hey Zeus, from on high Mount Olympus. It's the thunderbolts and the lightning that descends from on high to the earth. Love in action. Love in action. That's the Christ. And what is that action? That action is service and suffering for humanity. And Jesus is the Son of God, yes, but he's also the Son of Man, meaning the Son of woman, the Son who, the Christ that emerges from the divine feminine, who embodied it within her, in her womb, and cradled it and nurtured it and suckled it and fed it and clothed it and taught it and raised it and saw it to maturity. And what son isn't completely and totally devoted to his mother? What son of God and what son of man is not completely and utterly devoted to his mother? There is no Christification. There is no path to Christ consciousness without devotion to your mother. None. Forget it. None. Zero. Go away. Log out if you think otherwise. You will fail. Period. End of story. It's just the facts. It is what it is. There is no awakening without devotion. There is no Christ consciousness without selflessness. There is no embodying unconditional love without complete and total devotion to she whom first embodied it within you and cradled you and suckled you and nurtured you here and now and all the days of your life, before and henceforth. There is no Christ consciousness but that which is born of the Virgin. There is no devotion without speaking of how we use the gifts that our Divine Mother bestows upon us. Because it's one thing to remember your Divine Mother, and it's one thing to claim to be devoted to her. But how do we use her? How do we apply her gifts, or how do we waste them? How do we fritter them away? our energy, our vitality, the gifts, the serendipities, that which flows into our life, and also the tests and the trials and the ordeals. How do we receive and how do we apply? You know, there's that expression, pay it forward. How do we pay it forward? Or do we squander that which our Divine Mother gives us and bestows upon us? Do we become like spoiled little children, expecting everything and giving nothing in return, and not even having the decency to show gratitude, let alone devotion? Gratitude, by the way, is not devotion. Gratitude is a good first step, but it is not the same as devotion. Benjamin says, Scripture reminds us that we were created to serve God alone, not idols, money, or ourselves. In serving Him, we also serve others in love, not to win approval, but with sincerity, knowing that every act of service is ultimately unto Christ. Still, it seems that people so often drift towards serving wealth, and honestly, I struggle to understand why. And Benjamin also says, Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon, wealth. The concept of the impoverished seeker, so the spiritual aspirant who um, devotes themselves completely and assumes a life of poverty, that archetype is one that embodies this truth. One is poor because one has given everything that one has to others. It's actually in the Sermon on the Mount, is blessed are the poor in spirit, right? For there shall be the kingdom of heaven. If that's the right, Benjamin will correct me if I got that wrong, but it's blessed are the poor in spirit. Well, who are the poor in spirit? You're poor in spirit when you've given all your spirit away. You keep none of it for yourself. This is why you're poor in spirit. This is why many billionaires, when they're reaching the end of their life, they turn into these philanthropy monsters and they just give away all of their wealth. They build hospitals and schools and churches and you name it, and they just give away all their wealth in a desperate attempt, I guess, to buy their way into heaven or whatever, because they want to be poor in spirit, and all of their spirit is bottled up in mammon, and all of their wealth and all of their money and all of their resources and all of their success. That's where all their spirit went in their life. And now that they're at the end of their life, they're going to try to make an exchange and give away all the spirit that's bottled up inside all that money. They're now going to try to give it away in service and philanthropy. Well, look, I'm not one to judge. I'm not here to judge. I don't have a window into men's souls. But it doesn't mean that we have to be impoverished materially. Doesn't mean that. Doesn't mean that we have to be beggars, with a loin, with a throw a cloth over ourselves and go, wandering in the streets, homeless or whatever. That's why the Buddha emphasized the middle way. But to be poor in spirit, that's the path of the bodhisattva. That's the path of the saint. They're poor in spirit because they keep nothing for themselves. They want nothing for themselves. Like a mother who's completely devoted to her child and wants only to see their child survive and thrive in the world and become all that they can be. And a mother will hold nothing back. And a mother will and a mother will not pull any punches in telling you what you need to hear and kicking you in the ass when you need it, because that's what parents need to do. This week I happened to watch a 2-hour interview on Diary of a CEO with Matthew McConaughey. And in that interview, he revealed how many details about his childhood and growing up. And he explained that he came from a very loving family, but it was a very strict family, had a lot of tough love, as he put it, right? And he said, boy, if you crossed certain lines, you were going to get a licking. That's how he said it. And he said, I would get a licking. And when Steve Bartlett, Steve is the host of Diary of a CEO, he pressed him on this and he said, what do you mean take a licking or get a licking? He said, oh, with a belt. And at one point he said, now not to Steve directly, but like vicariously, when people come up to him, when people come up to me and try to tell me that I was abused, dude, don't try to tell me that I was abused. I was not abused. I did not come from an abusive household, an abusive parents. Right? I was loved. I knew I was loved. We all knew we were loved. And it's a remarkable interview to see someone who is so very in tune with being their authentic self and how much they value and cherish their upbringing and the gifts that they receive from their parents who were very, very passionate individuals. Flawed, sure, but very passionate and very loving. And there are many, many, many ways that the love of our Divine Mother is shown to us. But it's always what we need. It is always what's best for us. We might not like it at the time, But the wisdom that Matthew McConaughey brings to the table is that it's unpleasant. Nobody likes to get a licking. Nobody likes to get the belt. But boy, oh boy, did that teach me a few things. And boy, oh boy, was I thinking twice about doing that again. And boy, oh boy, did that toughen me up. And when you see an entire generation of young people who fall to pieces at the first sign of difficulty, you think to yourself, yeah, you know what? Instead of all that hyperbolic helicopter parenting, all that hyper parenting, right? These parents who are so terrified and so needing to control how their kids turned out and so afraid of their kids being harmed in some way. Well, now their kids can't function in the real world. I think that there's literally tens of millions of young people, young adults, who really could have used a licking or two growing up. And they certainly could have used parents who weren't so goddamn self-absorbed and afraid, but who were genuinely devoted. Like Matthew McConaughey's parents were genuinely devoted to him. Now they had their flaws. They might not have done things in the best way, but they were authentic in who they were, what they did, and how they raised their kids. And they did something right. Nobody's perfect, but they did something right. It's like Kathy says, I saw that CEO video. I think, Kathy, you would agree with me that, you know, uh, they did something right, because it's nice to see somebody from Hollywood, of all places, who was the it guy, who was the go-to guy. He was this guy and then that guy, and the making all the fluffy, what do you call it? The romantic comedies and all that stuff. He was that guy. And then one day he decided, when him and his wife had started their family, he said, I'm not going to be that guy anymore. I'm not that guy. I'm not that guy. Because too often we see too many people who just blow with the wind, and just they'll do whatever they need. They do whatever they're told to do, or do whatever they need to do whatever's fashionable, or go with the crowd, or go with the path of least resistance, or whatever you want to call it. But when we're devoted to God, when we're devoted to our innermost essence, our innermost intimate Christ, who wants to be born into the world, that Christ is literally in the womb of our individual divine mother. That Christ, by devoting ourselves to our divine mother, we're devoting ourselves to our innermost intimate Christ that is gestating within her. And she's showing us the way, and she's giving us all we need on that journey that we are on, in order so that we may die psychologically, that she may give birth to the Christ through us. That's real Christ consciousness. I'm so sick and tired of hearing about people talking about Christ consciousness who have no idea what they're talking about. They think that their ego is capable of Christ consciousness. They have no devotion. None. They're certainly not on a path of devotion. They're certainly not on a path to Christ consciousness. It's all just New Age mumbo jumbo. Mutaga says, since I was a child, I could astral travel, but since I didn't have a guide, I would just fly as high as possible in the cosmos, battle demons or fly over them, just fun times, most times. Until I found Attlas, to whom I am grateful for. He said, next time you astral travel, ask to meet your Divine Mother. Thank you, Mutaga, for reminding me of that. Because you're right. It's one of the first things you should do. And because once you see your Divine Mother, now you have that picture, that portrait. Even if you can't paint it like Leonardo da Vinci, and unfortunately you can't take a camera with you into the astral plane, but you can commit her to your memory and always carry her with you. Always have that memory, that vivid experience of her in the astral plane. And you know she's real. You've seen her. She has a face. Kathy says, yes, he knew in his soul they were devoted to him. And frankly, you can see how devoted he is to life and to his own family, to his wife and to his children. You see, he's paying it forward. And I think he's paying it forward in a number of different ways. Right? He's an artist. He really is an artist. And he writes poetry and so on. And he's kind of like a philosopher. Everybody made fun of him when he did those Ford commercials. But the only reason why he did those commercials is because he was in that movie, The Lincoln Lawyer. And somebody somewhere thought it would be a good idea, thought it would be maybe cute and clever to have him make commercials for Lincoln cars. And he was reciting some of his philosophy or what have you while he's driving around in his Lincoln, and he became an overnight meme, and everybody was making fun of him for weeks on end until Ford ended up pulling the ads for Lincoln. But that's because the world didn't understand him. That he was misunderstood. The normies, they didn't have a freaking clue who he really was and what he was talking about. Because the normies have so little respect for actors these days, and for good reason, because most actors, most Hollywood actors, don't give them a reason to, to have genuine respect. They're just celebrities, right? They're just idols. So when he did that, he was treated again like most normies treat people who are truly self-actualizing themselves. We very often are judged very harshly by the mob. Just look at Socrates, right? As another example of someone who was self-actualized, who ended was assassinated, murdered by the people of Athens. So the practice then to live a life of devotion is to observe yourself and remember your Divine Mother. And like all good servants, you serve your innermost Lord and Master. But do so with a sense of devotion to your Divine Mother. She is your muse. She is your immortal beloved. She carries the innermost intimate Christ inside you, the Son of Man, who longs to be born into this world through you. But who stands in the way? All of your eyes, all of your egos, the self, the adversary, the one that wants to make it all about themselves, the part of you that wants to make it about you. It's me, me, me. It's I. What's in it for me? No, I'm going to do this. I have Christ consciousness. I. This narcissistic, mystic pride. The Christ chases the moneylenders and the livestock traders out of the temple. Yeah, that's a good start. But then he says to the Pharisees, the false self, he says, I will tear down this temple, and in 3 days I will build a new one. Foreshadowing his death and resurrection. If you are devoted to God, if you are devoted to your Divine Mother, your devotion to Christ in any practical, meaningful sense, like any parent is devoted to their child, and any father is devoted to his wife who is pregnant with their child. Any man of any salt would do anything to his wife for the sake of his wife and for the sake of his unborn child. The innermost intimate Christ, the spark, the seed, the essence of your true self, which longs to be made flesh, which longs to be born into the world through you, that's the Son of Man. You're the man. That's the Son of God. The God who is one with the Holy Spirit, who impregnates Mary, the Divine Mother. To be devoted, Benjamin said earlier, he said, to serve God alone. God doesn't serve himself. All right, a father devotes himself to his son, his child. But when that child is yet unborn, God devotes himself to that child's mother. To be the Son of God, to bring the Son of God into the world, who is also the Son of Man, which is the He Zeus, the lightning that descends from on high, Mount Olympus, to the world. To be God's love in activity, we must completely devote ourselves to the mother of Christ, to the virginity of the Divine Mother, the purity of our Divine Feminine, our muse, who gives birth to all that we do that is of God, that is God made flesh. You don't serve God by words or attitudes or prostatations or intentions or anything of that matter. Because God isn't interested in being served. God is interested in serving others. And in order for God to be able to serve others through you, you must serve the Mother of God, the one who gives birth to the Christ, which is God in activity. Because the essence of God is selflessness. The essence of God is devotion. God, like any father, is completely devoted to his children, and we are all his children. For the normies and for everybody else, right? There's a different level of teaching. There's a different kind of service. There's a different kind of reverence and devotion. But we're not the normies and we're not everybody else. You are here for a reason. Because we are the few. We are not here to pay lip service. We are here to embody. We serve the Master, the Lord of the Manor, by preparing the house for his coming and the coming of all of his guests. When we open our heart, we open all the doors and all the windows, and the whole world comes to the manor. And we are the servants who serve all the host, right? The great host of the Lord. This is how you serve God. God does not want, not from us, God does not want that kind of devotion from us. God wants us to follow his example, the example of Joseph. Be completely devoted to Mary and care for and cultivate and nurture our innermost intimate Christ and bring him into the world. Because God is the three as one, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And Christ is God made flesh. We are being called to Christification. We are being called on the path of the Bodhisattva, of Buddhahood, of sainthood. in whatever form that takes according to the idiosyncrasies of your particular individuated essence within, your unique purpose in life, how God chooses to become flesh through you, and how the word is made flesh through your thoughts, through your deeds, your actions, and that which you create in the world, that which you beget in the world. You might be an artist, you might be a business person, you might just be a family person, whatever. This is what it means to serve, to fulfill the will of your Lord and Master. And how do you do that? You remember your place and you observe, you sit observant and waiting for your Master's guidance. And you remember that everything that you are able to do, that service that you are able to provide, is all made possible because of the divine feminine, because of the head of the household. Why traditionally women were always the head of the household. And even in castles or keeps or manors or mansions, there was always a head. Oh, what would you call her? She wasn't a maid. She was the head of all the servants, and she was there at the behest of the lord of the manor. Anyway, the word might come to me, might not. Leah says, "You reminded me of the saying, the road to hell is paved with good intentions." Yeah, what matters is our actions. That's what matters. What we bring into the world. What matters is the word made flesh. That's what matters. Intentions, they're useful and they're beneficial by virtue of it aligns our will with that of our innermost. But they're only the beginning. They're not enough. We have to follow through on those intentions. It doesn't mean that we won't make mistakes. It doesn't mean that we won't fall on our face. It doesn't mean that we won't fail. But we get ourselves back up, we brush ourselves off, and we get back up on the horse. And remaining devoted to our Divine Mother, like Alexander Dugin is devoted to the memory of his daughter, and how Da Vinci was devoted to the Mona Lisa, and Beethoven to his immortal beloved. That gives us that extra incentive, that extra power and strength, because it's not about us anymore, right? That's what I said about you. If you are on the path of devotion, you will always find a second wind and go the extra mile for others. You're truly spiritual when that is in your nature, when you are willing to suffer and sacrifice, truly suffer and sacrifice, and go the extra mile for the sake of others. Not because you're a people pleaser, but because they need someone to do it and you're the only one around to do it, so you do it. And So when you're able to pray to your innermost as though they were an other, it orients yourself in that way. That's one of the big problems with the new age and saying, well, it's all just me anyway. That's my higher self. Oh, well, I'm doing it for me then. It's my higher self. I'm doing it for my higher self. But that's so easily convoluted and co-opted by the ego. And then it doesn't give you this orientation of being selfless. It doesn't give you this orientation of being devoted. Devoted to whom? Yourself? Well, the ego loves to be devoted to itself. The ego does it all the time. It's called narcissism. And so you get caught in this terminal loop. So even though Benjamin says, we're here to serve God alone, not idols, not money or ourselves. So this is why the externalized imaging or imagining of God is useful, because it orients ourselves in that selflessness place where we're devoting ourselves to someone and something bigger than ourselves, that is other than ourselves. But of course, he's not other than ourselves, but this is just a methodology that allows us to safely practice devotion free of any narcissistic concerns and free of any identifications and attachments. This is the problem with the new age intellectualization of, oh, we are all God already. We are all one with Source. Yes and no. But devotion, service, and sacrifice to others, for the sake of others, that is the key. And knowing who to serve and how to serve comes by observation of ourself and remembering our Divine Mother and following her example and listening to the still soft voice of our innermost Lord and Master, who will whisper his will to us. And knowing full well that God wants the Son of God to be born in the world through us as the Son of Man, then we follow the example of selflessness of Joseph, of the selfless man who protects and defends and serves unconditionally his divine feminine wife, who is the mother of his child, who is the Son of God and the Son of Man. That's devotion. That's sacrifice. That's service. Right? It's not being a busybody and running around being a people pleaser. And it's not doing things for others so it makes you feel good. And it's not doing things so that you you gain accolades and awards and people admire you because, oh, he's so generous. No, this is metaphysical science we're speaking of here. Embodying your true self and bringing all that you are and were born to be into the world, and being devoted to that task. Does anybody have any comments or questions? If you're interested, Alexander Dugan, if you're curious. And the other, you know what? I can maybe pull up, well, I can certainly pull up the diary of a CEO interview with Matthew McConaughey, but that may not be so important for you to see. It was important for me to see for a number of different reasons. The other reason why it was important for me to see because um, I've been working this week on the Attlas.ca website, and there have been questions of branding and personal branding and other things of that nature. And the Matthew McConaughey talk on Dyer CEO was an excellent case study in what people cynically call personal branding, but it was really just living your authentic life. It wasn't a construct. It wasn't something made up. And that if you want to completely reimagine what branding can be and what branding should be and what it means to be authentic, it's a good case study. It's a good exercise in seeing that. But I actually wrote a blog article, and it's here on the new website. Um, hang on, if I can just, yeah. So this is the Atlas.ca, the Atlas Conscious Arts website, and there's a blog here called Insights, and it's the first one, case study, authentic personal brand without branding, and this is the interview, Matthew McConaughey with Steve Bartlett, and this is only a page long, but it has some relevant links here, like timestamps, and then you have the full interview is embedded in the blog. So if you're interested, you just go to Atlas Conscious Arts, that's atlas.ca, and just click on Insights here on the top left-hand corner, or you can just scroll down and you'll get to here near the bottom, we have it says seek self-evident experiential knowledge. And right here, the first article is the case study, authentic personal brand without branding. So this is what I'm going to be focusing my time on most of the time. Putting magic and meaning into your media and marketing. So it's bespoke creative consulting and solutions beyond the state of the art. Right? These four areas: branding, creative, marketing, and innovation. I have a very close friend of mine who's going to be working with me on it. He actually was in the chat today. I don't know if he's still there, but he was in the chat today, and he was on this program a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about consciousness and art and so on. So we're actually making this happen. We're putting our money where our mouths are, and we're going to be devoting ourselves to this enterprise of trying to bring conscious arts back to the industries that need it, and there are industries in need of a conscious makeover, right? And the reason why that A is in quotation marks is because we have to give STEM the A it so desperately needs. I like this. Eduardo came up with this. He said that STEM is fine, but it's steam that drives the engine of change, right? It's steam that drives the locomotive. So you have to put the A, the arts, back into STEM. And so Anyway, so this is online now. This is you can go and peruse this yourself if you're interested. And we might be, but this is the money making venture, right? Okay, so this is targeted towards companies, entrepreneurs, etc., right? But people who who are sick and tired of being disingenuous and chasing the almighty dollar. This is about, um, I call it purposeful profits, right? So you achieve purpose first, profits follow. If you're just chasing quarterly results, that's a recipe for disaster. That's just You're just asking for entropy to destroy everything, and that's where we are today, right? That's what we are in this dystopian nightmare, right? Where creatively speaking, unsustainable slop everywhere you look has got everything in an abysmal state. So we want to try to, again, bring conscious arts back into bear, back into the picture. So let me we got a few comments here. Benjamin says, I'm always grateful to the Divine Mother for everything I've been given in life, and I was reminded that there's no need to worry about anything. And Mutaga says, thank you, Atlas. Your teaching is always on perfect timing. Well, I appreciate that. I I hope that that's the case, and I do try to be in tune with that. Benjamin says, I hope you could also produce really meaningful children's books someday, reimagining timeless mythologies for children. I That's actually on our list of things to do, but before we can do that, we have to actually get some revenue coming in. So it's just a question of priority, right? That's on our list of things to do, because I have, you probably know this. I have my a poem that I wrote, which I've shared with you before, right? It's this one. Um, right? Ratatoskr in the Seed. And I really want this to be a children's book. But again, there's no money in publishing these days. So that's just going to be a labor of love. And in order for us to be able to get there, we have to be able to support ourselves. Like, so again, yes, but all in good time, all in good time. Leah says, blessings to you and Eduardo on this endeavor, and blessings to all. Thank you, Atlas, for all you do for humanity. Well, thank you, Leah, for being here, and thank you for the kind words and the blessings. Kathy says, thank you, Attila. Thank you, Kathy, for being here. And thank all of you for being here. I look forward to seeing you next week. Have a great week, and observe yourself. Remember your Divine Mother always, and as always, inferential peace. Take care, everyone.